This is Duke University.
Well, hi everyone. Great to see you here today. Thank you so much for being here. Today marks our second day of Global Career Week, which is a week of programming at Duke dedicated to all aspects of working globally. If you haven't already seen our lineup of events this week, I'm going to send you a link in the chat that outlines everything. We have a lot more happening this week, so definitely encourage you to check out and attend some of our other upcoming events if you are interested in international and global career pathways. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Hal Matthews. I'm an Associate Director for Global Careers with the Duke Career Center, and I work to support students who are interested in pursuing international opportunities. I'm particularly excited about this panel because I know that many of you are interested in living and working in Europe after graduation. And while there's definitely no single pathway to follow in order to develop a career in Europe, we do have two amazing alumni here today to share their stories, tips, and tricks of how they were able to make their careers a reality in Europe. Before we get into that, I did want to introduce my colleague, Sarah Russell, who's going to be moderating the panel today. Sarah is an academic dean with Trinity, where she advises students on a wide range of topics, including graduate school and global opportunities at and after Duke. And as we were planning this week of programming, Sarah was really instrumental in putting together this Europe-focused session. So very thankful to her for being here today. And in addition to our awesome panelists, both Sarah and I have experience living and working in Europe. So we'd be more than happy to connect with you after the conversation today if you'd like some additional information and support. And with that, I will turn it over to you, Sarah, to kick things off.
Great, terrific. Welcome, everybody. So I'd like to do a brief introduction of our two alum guests, and then I'm going to turn it over, offer them some questions to start us going about how they've chosen and gotten involved in their careers. And then we will move on towards a couple more questions for them and ultimately give you all a chance to ask your specific questions. So our two guests today are Emma Dries, who currently serves as Chief of Staff for the Investor Leadership Network and is based in Madrid, Spain. She holds both a master's and a bachelor's in public policy at the Sanford School at Duke. The company she's working for launched in 2018 under the Canadian presidency of the G7. The Investor Leadership Network is comprised of 13 global asset managers and asset owners with almost $10 trillion in US dollars in assets under management. The ILN aims to leverage its collective brain trust and influence to move the needle forward in sustainable finance. Prior to her current position, Emma worked for the International Organization for Migration in Geneva, Switzerland, where she analyzed outcomes based on the World Health Organization's development planning for an international instrument on pandemic prevention, preparedness, and response. Our second panelist, Prasad Tawade, is currently the Senior Strategic Marketing Manager for Littelfuse, a company based in the Netherlands that designs and manufactures circuit protection products for electronics, automotive, and electrical industries. He's had over 16 years experience in the semiconductor industry. He has a BS in computer engineering from Pune University and a master's in engineering management from Duke. In his current position, he develops and coordinates marketing strategies for Littelfuse products and customers. Prior to his current position, he was distribution manager at IXYS Semiconductor, also based in the Netherlands. So let me ask both of you, I'll start with Emma, how did you get on this career path and how did you choose to follow work and look for positions that were outside of your home country?
Well, my story starts at Duke, as I think most things you'll realize. I decided to do the 4+1 program through Sanford. For those of you who aren't familiar, it means that you basically cover most of your undergrad in 3 years, and then your senior year you start grad classes, and then it leaves you one additional year to figure out what you want to do next. At least that was what I needed when I was looking at options following Duke. As part of that program, I applied for the Duke in Geneva program, which is it's typically for masters, but undergrads can be involved in it as well. And it allows you to both work if you're interested and take a course week in Geneva. This is, sorry, a little long-winded, but I'll get to the point shortly, is that when I was working at the IOM there, I met my current boss. Her name's Amy Hepburn. She's fantastic, also a Duke alum. And so as I was finishing my master's, I did so in Berlin. I fell in love with living in Europe. I had fallen in love with living in Geneva. 2 visa processes had been survived at that point. And so I was working as basically a part-time consultant as part of my master's, just exploring what I wanted to do, what I was interested in. And keep in mind, I had no idea what I was interested in at this point. I had gone from focusing on pandemic prevention at IOM, formerly focusing on COVID at Duke, and then kind of fell in love with this work, specifically on the thought leadership side of ILN. And I was offered a position through Amy to be her chief of staff. That happened at the end of my master's, when I was in a bit of a, as I'm sure you can imagine for those seniors, panic on what was next and what I wanted to do, all knowing I wanted to be in Europe. And to answer your question, Dr. Russell, there was a lifestyle that I loved in Europe. I built amazing connections through both my internship in the summer before, my work at the IOM, and then doing my master's in Berlin in the second half. So I fell in love with lifestyle, fell in love with work, fell in love with my routine, and a little bit of a different lifestyle than what I was used to in the US. And then decided to take this position. I work completely remotely. So when I was looking at options, down the path of visas and what was actually feasible for me, I saw that I could be a remote worker in Spain. So I just finalized my visa. So you're catching me in a pretty fantastic moment where I've gotten over another hurdle. But I minored in Spanish as an undergrad and felt like this was a path that was meant to be. Keeping in mind, I travel for work at least once a month, whether it's Europe, Canada, US. So regardless, busy on the in-person front, but it was fantastic to be able to find a way that working completely remotely, there's a real pathway to be able to stay in Europe. Prasad, I'll pass it over to you.
Thank you, Emma. Thank you, Sarah, Dr. Russell, and thank you, everybody. My story is not as focused as Emma's stories. I just happened to be in Europe by chance. I am, like Dr. Russell mentioned, I'm a graduate from Duke Engineering or the engineering management program. I was just telling them before the call, I graduated, unfortunately, in the year when there was a recession of 2008. So after pursuing my master's at Duke, I decided I always wanted to work for a technical company, but more on a techno-commercial road. So I took a job as product manager with Cypress Semiconductor. I worked for a few months in the Bay Area, and then they were kind enough to relocate me to India. That's my home country. So I started to work there as a business product manager and business development manager for that Asia. That gave me an opportunity to travel Asia and visit customers there. At the same time, there was personal reasons. I was getting married the same year in 2008. So we decided to pause and stay in the home country for a few years. And then again in 2012, 2013, maybe we started to get bored. So we decided to look around. And that's where this time my wife made a move. She always worked as a technology consultant, and she used to work for the European banks as a technology consultant. They had been asking her to move to Netherlands for a few years. She used to work for the National Netherlands Bank. Now she works for the ABN AMRO Bank, and she made a move. Fortunately, we had a 2-year daughter, and we were really confused on how she would adjust to Netherlands. So I decided to take a break for 6 months, and that's how I moved to Netherlands. The good part of why we chose Netherlands was, or I think it is in general in Europe, it is the case. Emma, correct me if I'm wrong, but as a dependent, you are allowed to work in Europe, unlike US. I remember during the H1. I'm not sure if the rules have changed, but in Netherlands, they allowed me. So I took a gap to spend some time with my daughter, and then started to look around or fish around careers. Duke Network always comes to help. The first time I thought I would do a part-time PhD with the Rotterdam School of Management. That's a reputed school here because I was on a break. There was an assistant professor from Duke who had just moved to Duke, and then somehow with his conversation, I had a couple of sessions with him, and he recommended I should better be continuing my career in corporate versus doing a PhD. And then there was another Duke alumni who helped me to get into my previous organization, which Dr. Russell mentioned, for IXS. And then I started there as a distribution sales. And my company later was acquired by Littelfuse, which I'm working for now. And then I didn't like sales much. And then I moved back to a techno commercial role, or you can call me. Now I manage the marketing and strategy for Littelfuse globally. That again gives me an opportunity to travel around, except the 2 years of pandemic, which was kind of frustrating. But I work remotely as well. We do have an office, but post-pandemic, everybody has become very flexible. They want to go light on their real estate asset as well. So there is an inherent benefit for the companies as well. And so that's my story. That's how I ended up coming to Netherlands. Yeah, as I said, it was more of a personal choice to move around and see around Europe. And it gives me an opportunity to travel seamlessly in Europe. You can enjoy different culture, both personally as well as from a corporate perspective as well. It's very nice to see different cultures and when you meet different customers and the different part of it. So that's why.
Yeah, so let me, just because I wanted to leap on what you were referring to, Prasad, if you all could both talk a little bit about what you really like about being in the locations you're in. And some of that may be partly about the work you're actually doing, but it sounds also like you can speak a little bit to why you like physically being in the countries you're in the cultures you're in.
I can kick us off here because Prasad, I think I may have a little bit more daylight here if we're talking
Sure.
from location. But I think one of the key reasons why I love Madrid is I've been speaking Spanish since I was 15, 16, not very well up until I hit college, and fell in love with the language, the work, etc. And so when I was at Duke, COVID hit my sophomore year, and I was supposed to go abroad in Spain. I was supposed to go to Paraguay for a research project. Both of those fell through. And so getting back into language, speaking Spanish, not just, between friends, but also bringing it into a professional sphere as well has been fantastic. It's also, as Prasad was noting before, the ease of access, travel, freedom that you have is wildly different from the US. You can make a trip to try out a new country, new city, every single weekend, especially when you're a remote worker. Prasad, I know you're in a similar boat. And even just from a lifestyle perspective for me as well, after living in Switzerland, in Germany, I fell in love with the fact that I can walk to get, a fantastic glass of sangria, wine, coffee, walk to my grocery store. It was a bit of a more relaxed lifestyle and didn't need to own a car or think about other things that were tripping me up when I was in Durham. As I'm sure some of you know, it's much easier to have a car and all of these other steps that in Europe, or at least where I'm based in Madrid, you don't need. So the lifestyle perspective was also, for me at least, a much higher level of access and travel and freedom than I would have had otherwise. And then just also flagging, and this is, another point, is I work for a Canadian company. So most of my meetings start early afternoon and I'll end around 10 p.m., which works out well for those of you who are familiar with Spain, where dinner doesn't start until 10:30. You can't get served before 9. So it worked out beautifully in terms of a lifestyle and setup, and also my partner is based here as well. So it worked out beautifully and made me fall in love, not just with Europe, but with Spain. Prasad, I'll pass it to you.
Thank you. I would ideally like to be in Spain, but Netherlands is also a lovely country. One of the reasons, there's a lot of sun there. We don't have sun here in Netherlands, but I completely echo what Emma says. Is the lifestyle which helps you to gather. It's a bit relaxed. Though I do work for American companies based in Chicago, so I do have late evening calls there. But you can start your mornings more. To add to what Emma said, the other perspective is with kids. I have two naughty monsters downstairs. One is 10 and one is 4. And it's much easier for them from a kid's perspective. So that was another personal reason for me to stay back. And again, like Emma said, every 300 kilometers you travel, you have different cuisines, different cultures, different interactions. Even in a professional setup, like in at Netherlands, you would probably, when you are on a business dinner, you start at 5:30 and you probably end at 8:30. If I'm in Paris for a dinner, you usually start at 6:30, and I don't think we end up before 11:30. If you're in that Trinity corner between Italy, Spain, and France, you always start with a debate which are the best wines served here. So all in all, food culture and travel is what, other than the professional help which you get, these are more reasons to stay back in Netherlands for me.
So now I guess the next question would have to be, what are some of the things that maybe are a little challenging, that are maybe the opposite side of the experience? Not so great, difficult, sometimes the challenge, sometimes frustrating.
So I can start that one. I mean, luckily Emma did learn Spanish at a very young age, but for me, learning Dutch was the most difficult part of it. It never was a problem for me when I worked professionally, because most of our customers, most of our company colleagues are in an English setup, so we do professionally speak English. But when you go and live like where I live, away from the city, from Rotterdam, around 20 minutes, most of the neighborhood is speak local dialect and Dutch. So learning about the language was the most difficult part of it. And the second one was more like the food habits in India, something similar to the southern part of Europe. We have dinners a little late, around 8:30. Here, people have dinner at 5:30. So the first time I was invited for a dinner to our Dutch friends, they invited us at 5:30, and we were out of home at 8:30, and I was still hungry. So that was a couple of things which I found a little more challenging in a fun way. Uh, and then there are other cultural aspects to it which you need to work around, because I am an expat in this country, so I need to make sure that I'm used to their culture, I'm used to their understand their basic things when you are in a setup there. So that was for me the two most challenging ones.
Prasad, that's great, because I have complete opposite challenges in Spain, which I think also speak to European culture as a whole and how diverse it can be just within a few hundred kilometers. But yes, I think that's a great point, Prasad, is just being sensitive to how you've been raised, etc., and how you are an expat in this country, figuring out how to be sensitive to cultural norms, certain expressions as well. I mean, even though I speak Spanish, Prasad, there are a lot of phrasings that I've used that are not relevant here, or even sometimes inappropriate here, that I had to learn the hard way from coming from speaking more Latin American Spanish.
True.
And again, it's just always being a bit more aware and sensitive. And I think this is a bit different from being in the US, where you know what the norms are, you know what cultural sensitivities are, especially in a business context as well. I mean, when I was in Germany, for example, if you were on time, you were late. And here in Spain, if you're 30 minutes late, you're early. So it's quite a diverse change to what I'm used to. But it's been fantastic to have that learning curve. I think the other side of things, and this is a little bit less sexy than good food and good friends, is visas and taxes, and just being very diligent about planning around this. For me, at least, I was in a bit of a complicated situation just because I'm remote, and I had to really focus on building, my visa application by myself, but also then making sure that you plan appropriately on when you need to file taxes. Again, not sexy, but a big part of moving abroad is thinking about these things and what works for you, etc. And also just, as you begin to reach out and make your community, I think the best thing you can do is find friends of friends, because at least for me, I moved to Spain not knowing anyone. And so I think that can be, your first 2-3 weeks can be a bit more isolating when you're coming in and you don't know a soul. But once you get over that month or 2-month hump, it makes things, I think, so much easier. And Prasad, I know you move with your wife, so it may have been a bit more of a supportive system as well. But also just knowing everything's a transition.
Yeah.
And being aware of when you need support and when to reach out to people is another key component.
That is true. No, I agree with in
Go
terms
ahead.
of the visa process as well. Luckily for me, the company had done the process for me, so I didn't have to do the initially when we came, my wife's company did the visa processing. But in terms of rules and regulation, it is nice to know it's a different tax structure as compared to your home country or where you come from. So it's nice to know your relationship with your home country taxation versus here. For example, here after first 5 years, you need to pay taxes on your income if you have any income in your home country as well. So just being aware of it and making sure that you abide with the rules is something. Well, in case of Netherlands, they do make sure that you are abiding whether you want it or you don't want it. So death and taxes are the two constant in Netherlands, as they say.
Couple of questions on the nuts and bolts here. Were you either of you able to find reliable resources in terms of help or guidance for the visa processes and the tax processes? Was there any resources that helped you kind of move through those hurdles?
For me, at least, I again came in quite blind, but Facebook groups of all things are fabulous as a pooled resource to figure out who is, supporting you from a tax perspective, who's reliable in terms of applying for visas. Typically, hiring a tax accountant or a lawyer is, at least in my experience, been much cheaper in comparison to the US. And so placing these open forums, especially for me being, an expat in Madrid, there are these amazing communities of people who are just looking to support and share their experiences. And so from a resource perspective, if you have Facebook and you're moving to a new country, it is a fantastic resource. And I may be aging myself here a bit, but I could not recommend it more. Is just making sure that, you can share your perspective or ask for help in these forums is superb. Prasad, I don't know what your experience was on this.
So my experience was the same thing. As I mentioned earlier, from a visa perspective and the legal hassles, my wife's company took much of the work there. But definitely, when you have to settle in, like when I had to find a job, or if there is any consultant there, the Facebook group definitely helped with the initial movement. But also when I moved into Netherlands, there were forms or formats like expat groups on Netherlands. Again, Facebook helped to make these connect, but there was expat group Rotterdam. They organized, that was another voluntary organization which every once in 6 months organized event in the evening, drinks event. But they used to also have some sort of formal events where they would bring in like a rental people who wants rental, they would bring in tax people who would help with all these things, and then at the end you could work with them to make sure that you are doing the process rightly. So the groups like expat groups in Rotterdam definitely helped me in the initial phase of it.
So that's a very helpful thing. I think we're having some questions pop up in the chat, but I wanted to just maybe move towards a kind of broader question, and then we'll answer those specifically. If you wanted either of you to give students, the current group in the room, some specific advice for how to actually specifically look for work in a country of their choice. You both had an experience of starting off in a place and then realizing that this would be a good fit for you. But if you were going back to that original process and you were actually intentionally looking for finding a job in a specific country, what would your advice be on how to do that?
I can kick it off first, but there's this phrasing around how weak ties can be your strongest. And when I say weak ties, it can mean a friend of a friend, it could be an alumni, it can be an event like this where you meet someone who's doing something that interests you. And typically it'll be, you'll have this connection and they'll refer you to someone else. And again, it's a weak tie. It's someone you've connected to once or twice, but they can be the most impactful, I think, to your career. And for me, that weak tie came from Duke and Geneva program, working in Switzerland, figuring out the direction I wanted to take my career and next steps in, and ultimately, going through the path of an internship during my master's. And so I would highly recommend, if you see an alumni who's doing something that looks interesting to you, reach out. If you see something on Handshake that interests you and a speaker that may look interesting, I mean, these individuals are already excited and looking forward to speaking to Duke students, take full advantage. And even, I mean, outside of LinkedIn, outside of Handshake, talk to your friends, to your family members about your work and what you think looks exciting and interesting to you, and find those connections. I mean, everyone is more than happy to have a quick coffee chat or a quick phone call and see how they can help you in the best possible way. Everyone's been in a similar job hunting position. So Prasad, I'll pass it to you.
Thank you. I mean, I would second again what Emma said. Duke Network is the best network you have. We have alums everywhere. Like I mentioned, be it my first job, which was at Cyprus Semiconductor, that was helped me by a Duke alumni. He was a Fuqua pass out in '96. The person who helped me to get some few footings here in Netherlands was a Duke alumni pass out from economics in '88. So that was a long time connections which help. And every Duke alum is always willing to help you. So always best to utilize the Duke network. Need not be a person from your course or your grad school per se. It can be a Fuqua, but all of us are more than willing to help. That would be the best, reaching out to people. The other opportunities are there. A lot of companies within, like for me, when I was starting to look out for opportunities, it was basically Netherlands, but countries like Germany have a good economic resources. So there are a lot of job availability in Germany, France, Netherlands, or the Scandinavian. Some of these countries are, to name a few, where I know people have come outside from their home country and found a job opportunity there.
That's great. I was thinking, at this point, maybe we should drop in on a couple of the questions that are coming up in chat. Hal, what do you think?
Let's do it.
All right. So I think we addressed Alex's question about sort of how do you go about finding country in your work in your chosen countries and reaching out for visa. And it sounds to me, Emma and Prasad, that you both sort of really going back to the idea that your network, no matter how weak some of the ties are and how much you are, in the beginning of building that, is a tremendous resource, and that your expat community and your Facebook pages are tremendously good because everybody's sort of sharing advice. It's fascinating to me because I've heard this for a while, and particularly in visa support. And it does seem like there's this robust kind of grassroots community of people in any country sort of navigating the visa process via kind of shared community support. And I think that's wonderful. And I think that's also puzzling, but I think it seems to be very common. I have Pranjala has a question for you, Prasad. They're also MEM grad and wanted to pursue a career in product management in the semiconductor industry. Since this industry is so niche, how does a person stand out in a pool of applicants? What are the opportunities in Europe for product marketing within semiconductor industry? All the rest of you, just listen up because this is a great, perfect, specific example, even if you yourself are not interested in semiconductor work.
So there is a myth that there is a lot of semiconductor industry out. I mean, it's true, not a myth, sorry, is run out of the Bay Area where the technology comes. But there are European companies like NXP Semiconductors or Infineon for Germany. So you have, I mean, most of these companies which have an European headquarters or at least have a major presence in Europe is the best place to start looking at. Like I said, like I suggested, it could be Infineon, which is a big company. You have companies like ASML, in which has been in the news for a long time. There are few companies which help. You can start looking at their career section. They definitely have product marketing experience in terms of what makes you stand out of your resume. You definitely, the basic one would be to have a electrical or an electronics undergrad position. The Duke name definitely helps to position your resume in front of the candidate, and then bringing in your experience from a product marketing side. If you have done courses, I know, I mean, because it was a question specifically from MEM, there were a lot of questions asked in terms of what did you learn at general marketing course, or how did you look at your finance? We used to have Professor Skender who used to teach us finance. So how did you look at cash flows? These are all product manager, because when you own a product manager, it's not only technical, you have to manage the commercial side part of your product strategy, product management. So all these learnings which you have at MEM will definitely help you to answer some of the interview questions related to product management. Again, if you have any specific question, feel free to reach out to me. Because I am in a semiconductor industry, I would be more than willing to help you or guide you if you need more. But on top of it, as I said, look for companies which are within Europe. Look for have a product marketing portfolio, and related to your course, most of the interview questions would be around that one, and it'll help you to see through the interview process. I hope that answers.
So, yeah, and I think, Ranjal, we're a small enough group. If you want to, even maybe follow up with Prasad at a different point, I'm guessing Prasad would be fine with that.
Yeah, sure.
Yes,
Cool.
definitely.
What she's wondering is that she's interested in working in a Spanish-speaking country and is more familiar with Latin American culture and language. And she wants to know, did you consider working in Latin America at all? What are you enjoying about working in Spain, as opposed to what you think your experience might be if you had been in another Spanish-speaking country or other Spanish-speaking countries?
So great question, Brooke. I was in love with the idea of living in South America for many years and did a lot of professional work to apply. Just flagging for you, I think a great experience, especially as, I don't know what year you are, but as you're thinking about this, is the Fulbright program. Fulbright has a number of available projects in South and Central America, and it's a great stepping stone into this work. I applied, they didn't love me and they didn't want me as part of the program, but it does speak to how so many more doors open. And I had a very good friend who lived and worked in Asunción in Paraguay as well, loved their work there, and it really opened doors to research, to understanding a bit more about the work or culture that you're interested in. I would say, just flagging from a living and working in Spain versus, a Latin American focus, I have the ability to travel, I think, a bit more easily, have a bit more access living in Spain than I maybe would if I were in Paraguay or in South America. Obviously, only speaking to the experience that I know of in South America, but I do love how easy it is for me to travel, much more attainable for me to go to Switzerland or France for a quick weekend away than it would be, I think, if I were based in Central or South America. And from a culture perspective, obviously very different living in Spain and Latam, even with a similar language. But I do love that I have a lot of access and freedom to travel and move and take advantage of, I think, other benefits I maybe would not have been able to if I received the position that I was gaming for my senior year through Fulbright. So again, as some options close, others open, and I think that's the most exciting part about where you are right now in your undergraduate career is finding what doors will open and what will work for you career-wise.
I have a follow-up question for you, Emma, just in that respect. As you were sort of developing this, sort of fluency in Spanish, now I realize that your fluency in Spanish and Spanish culture isn't automatically translatable in the same community in Latin America, but do you imagine, can you picture a scenario where you might follow this part of your career with work in Latin America, or do you feel fairly tracked in Europe at this point?
I think I'm open to anything at this phase. I focus my master's in international development. And so I think a focus in Latin America would have been fantastic. And I think right now I'm enjoying the fruits of Spain, and some of the access that comes with it. But most of my research and my work before I graduated Duke and even up until now have been focused in private capital mobilization and emerging markets. So taking a look at what would be feasible in Central and South America would be of incredible interest. And it's the beautiful thing I think about life and careers, that it takes you in ways you may have not expected. Prasad, I'm not sure if you expected to be in the Netherlands at this phase either, but.
No, I agree with you completely. You can, I mean, your life is so fluid today that you can move around quite easily based on your interests.
So here's a question from Sam, and I think this is actually a useful segue from what I was asking you, Emma, about sort of whether your establishment of fluency in Spanish buys you this now flexibility in other Spanish contexts. Sam asks, in your job search, how do you filter for positions or teams that essentially work in English? And how do you also look for those that will provide visa support? I think one of the things that has come up in a presentation about internships yesterday is the challenge of companies willing to be interested in you if they know they have to go through a visa process with you. So that's kind of a two-part question. One, companies where major language of the work, the professional setting is English, and the other is companies that are open to supporting visa support. And as much as you all know, would be wonderful to hear, as much as you know.
So from my perspective, usually I have always worked for American companies. So definitely when they have a setup here in Europe, many a times they are willing to sponsor the visa, unless and until it's on the job front perspective. There is always a clear distinction of when they say you would need English speaking. And sometimes if it's, so for example, if we are hiring an pan-European sales lead or product marketing person, we would definitely want him to work in English. But for example, if it is a regional sales manager for Benelux area, which is Belgium, Netherlands, and Luxembourg, then we would say that, hey, knowing Dutch is mandatory. But that's a clear distinction which we have on our company's portal, or even when we put the job on LinkedIn perspective. So that's a clear, you can filter on job which mark as Dutch mandatory, or where you need English as mandatory. So that's one part of it. In terms of companies who sponsor visas, I know, I mean, this is back 8 years back, but I know there is an international department which every company need to be registered, especially if they have to sponsor visas for Netherlands, working in Netherlands. I think that's, I'm not sure if it's a publicly available information or was it sent to us by my wife's company, but I can look it up and follow up with an email, Dr. Russell's, to you. But I can check that. But those were the two options which we were looking at when I moved here to that one. I hope that answers the question.
Hi, I've noticed I've got a couple of people. Hal, I've got a couple of you with their hands raised. Are we a small enough group to unmute them, or should?
Yeah. Juan has been waiting patiently, so
All right.
for a little while now. So thanks, Juan. Do you want to go ahead and ask?
Yes, thank you so much, Emma and Prasad, for sharing with us your experience. Just for context, I'm a second-year Master of Public Policy at Stanford this year, and I'm from Colombia. So, after contemplating being here in the US and how hard it could be for my migration status, I've contemplated to go to pursue a career in Europe. But I'm wondering if you can like speak a little bit more about how do you think about your long-term career and the place that you're right now? Is it more structured, or like is it more like you're thinking, okay, I'm gonna do this for a few years and then I'm gonna go back to my country, or like I'm gonna move to another place? Because trying to figure out what your long-term career is in a place that is not your country, I think it's a little bit challenging. So if you can speak a little bit more about that, that'd be.
Well, that's an excellent question. I think that's very interesting. Tell us, Prasad and Emma, what do you think?
Speaking from, I mean, Prasad is a family, children. I came in, completely single and not quite knowing what to expect on my side. And so in terms of a long-term plan, I had expected to be in Berlin as part of my grad program for 4 months. I extended it to a year and I also fell in love with Europe and my partner now. So that helps with the long-term planning on that front as well. But also I think I've realized that I have no interest in going back to the US just based on my current lifestyle at the moment. And I also think that the diversity of language, the diversity of culture keeps it so much more interesting for me as well. For context, most of my Duke alumni friends are based in New York, based in DC. And I just want to flag for those of you who are looking at visa options, I think one of the easiest ways to get into Europe is through the UK. So there's a visa called the High Potential Individual Visa. I looked into this, Dr. Russell may be able to speak on this with more eloquence than I can. But because you are a Duke alumni, it gives you a fast-tracked access into the UK. So it means that you don't have the same stress. It means that your employer doesn't have to sponsor you. And so as you're thinking through potential job options, and it may be looking a little bit daunting, I think the UK is a great place to start, just from not even, a culture perspective, a language. And then also I think in terms of work style, it's quite comparable to the US. You do get better health benefits and you do get longer vacation. So if those aren't two pluses already, I think that's good to flag. But I also think, and just speaking on as well, if you're looking on LinkedIn, you can flag English speaking roles. You can see what they're looking for in that way. But just flagging that there is, just being an alumni from Duke, this fast track way into easily gaining a visa. Dr. Russell, let me know if I didn't capture that correctly with the HPI.
No, I think actually that's Hal has followed up with a description of it in the chat. So there's a link there for anybody who wants to look into that. I actually only recently learned about it from another Duke alum who's actually originally from Uganda, worked in New York, and then she was working for Bank of America and moved to their London office. But she, in the process of looking for choices, that was something she looked into and she told me about it. But yeah, it's in the chat, so you might definitely want to explore that. Prasad, did you want to follow up on that question at all about your long-term visions?
Yeah, so unfortunately, I really am not a long-term person. It's just like we decide to work on few things and we take it as you say never. We were here for a couple of years. We thought we'll roam around Europe, and which we did predominantly in the first 2 years, but then we just fell in love with this place and we started to continue there. At some point of time, maybe when the kids come for graduation to US, we might return to our home country. But for me, Europe, to all reasons Emma said, is true for me as well. It's easy culture, easy access. It's closer to my home country. It's only a 8 hours flight versus 18 hours if I was in the US, for that matter. And it's easy accessible both in Asia as well as US. If I have to go for a headquarter meeting, it's an 8 hours or a 6 hours flight. So I don't think I would be out of Europe a little, at least in the near short term, long term, whatever you call it. The other part which I would like to provide insight into is like once you spend around 5 years in at least in Netherlands, you get an access to become a permanent resident member of this country. So then that goes away with your visa sponsorship and things like that. It's something similar to the green card which US has, and that also gives you, and some of the companies are also, I think they call it as a blue card or something. I may be getting this wrong, but there, which allows you to work in another country within Europe as well. So a lot of expats do utilize that facility to, so that you can seamlessly move around. If you're still willing to travel and work in another country, you're allowed to do that in Europe, at least in the Schengen countries. Blue card, yeah, that's one. Thanks, Hal. That allows you to work in at least the 20, 25, 29 Schengen countries. You can work. So that's another advantage, I think, of being in Europe. And if you want to go do a long-term planning or move to another country, that's an option available for you guys.
So I want to let Axel ask a question, but I just wanted to say that the sort of hidden subtext of a question like this is, are your moms and dads okay with you being so far away? But you don't have to answer that. It's just one of those things that is part of the decision, I think, when you move away from the home country, right?
I can definitely answer that. My parents are not, because their grandchilds are away from there.
Right,
And the
right.
younger one is a COVID kid. So she speaks predominantly Dutch versus the native, because she goes for the daycare. So they find it hard. It's been changed because now they travel very frequently after the COVID times. So they are okay now. But yes,
Yeah,
definitely
that
being
can be a
away from
factor.
grandparents, yeah, is grandkids is a challenge.
Axel, go ahead.
Thank you, Dr. Russell. Thanks also, Prasad and Emma, for sharing your experiences with us today. My question is probably more geared towards Emma. So for context, I'm a senior right now, a political science major, and I'm very interested in working in international development in Europe after graduation. But because of COVID and like weak passport issues, I'm from the Philippines, I wasn't able to study abroad or intern in Europe while I was in college. And when I've started in my job search, I've found that a lot of the jobs that I've been looking at, it feels like you would be at an advantage if you're already in Europe when you're applying, because sometimes the interviews are like, oh, we hold like in-person interviews. Or yeah, it just seems to me that I would have made more connections if I have had like prior work experience in Europe before I graduated. So would you have any advice on how I could possibly like get my foot in the door given this context?
So I think one focus that you can make, and I learned this a bit when I was in Switzerland in Geneva, is that international organizations like the UN have a mandate where they need to diversify the nationalities of who's involved. The visa process, you don't have to think about as well. It's very straightforward. So I think if this is at all interesting to you, looking at UN organizations or UN related organizations is a great first step. And seeing which Duke alumni are involved is a great way to have a chat, see their experience, especially if they're non-American, and how their experience was getting their foot in the door in Europe on that front. Also, I mean, even again, HPI, regardless of your nationality, that support from Duke is incredibly helpful. When I was going through that process as well, I had never received a request for an in-person interview. I only had calls. Now that we're in this post-COVID world, I think that also makes it a bit more easy, and there's less interest, I think, in having as many people in office as well. I know, Prasad, you noted that you're basically fully remote at your job as well.
True.
But I do think, especially, in terms of access and visa issues, taking a look at global organizations. So IOM could be one of them, and they have headquarters based in Rome for World Food Program. You have Geneva, you have Zurich. There's a number of options, and I think just looking at individuals who have work experience in those countries, sending cold emails. I'd spent a number of hours my senior year doing that as well, is really helpful to just get perspective, and people typically want to pass and support you along the way, even if they can't provide a direct experience or opening. So I think hunting a little bit on LinkedIn, Hal, I know you noted LinkedIn as a great resource as well, is a great way to get a touch point on what's feasible. But I feel your pain a bit in not having had any experience before you become involved in the careerscape.
Thank you so much.
Annabelle, do you want to go ahead?
Hi, thank you, Emma and Prasad. Thank you, Dr. Russell and Matthew, for organizing this. My question was about the HPI in the UK. So I'm on an F1 visa, and I just finished my master's in econ and computer science from Duke. I'm also like an international student in the United States. So I think given how the economy is doing right now, especially in tech, it's not been the most positive experience in terms of applying, especially given like your visa status. Employers are hesitant since it's an additional cost and there's no guarantee. Because Duke has sponsored my visa for like 3 years. I'm on a STEM program. So if I take the HPI route in the UK, again, that's a work permit for what, 2 years. In your experience or the experience that your friends have had, are they facing like similar constraints? Because technically, even in the US, I have a work permit till 2026. But yeah, if I don't have an employer who's willing to employ me, then that work permit sort of expires. And that's conditional on like me not having, I can't work beyond 2026 without an employer sponsoring my visa. And I believe it's a similar thing in the UK. I may not need a visa for 2 years. But is that kind of hesitation there in the UK as well? Is it better to target like multinationals, or are local companies like startups also willing to hire? Like, if you could share your thoughts on that, that would be helpful.
Prasad, I think you'll be the best resource on this in the
Yeah,
tech.
so I'm not aware of this high potential individual visas, but I have few friends who have been working in the UK and found an opportunity to work there. Startups, I'm not really sure whether they would be able to, or they have the bandwidth to process an international work visa after this one, but I have friends who have found opportunities. It is hard. Anu, I know what I've been to the similar situation in 2008 when I was graduation. There were not many companies who were sponsoring the visa process despite things. Currently, yes, there is a major slowdown in a lot of European countries, including the UK as well. I'm really not sure about what the current grad students are going through, but I have known a few people who work in the tech industry, or at least the IT side industry, where there could be definitely an opportunity, easier to get opportunity. So I remember referring to the US part of it. Some of us chose to go back to the home country because I was keen that I wanted to work in product marketing, but some people stuck on and they wanted to have a career in management, but because of the job, they could find a job in their original field, like IT or economics or whatever, and they stuck to. They don't choose their ideal job. They did choose whatever job they had, sorted out the visa issue, and then later in time you are definitely able to make a switch there. I've seen people moving across the board with different roles. So that is also, I thought, was smartly done by some people who stayed on for those 3 years, found a job which was not their ideal match, which they had imagined when they took a course at Duke, but they took an alternate path and then came back to what they wanted to do.
I think
I
that's a
don't know.
yeah, go ahead, sorry.
No, that's all I wanted to say.
Yeah, I think that's a very good strategy. We are coming up to the end of the hour, but I want to leave, I think Sam Campbell has one more really good question. Sam, do you want to ask it yourself, or I can read it too, whichever?
Sure, I can ask it. So my question is, I've heard that there's this trade-off when you're considering European jobs versus US jobs, between maybe the US offers a better salary, maybe lower tax bracket, versus the European jobs would have perhaps a lower salary and higher taxes, but better benefits, better healthcare, better work-life balance. Has this come up in your own career considerations? And if so, how? I'm thinking specifically in terms of like your long-term horizon, being able to save for retirement, that kind of thing.
Yes, when I first saw my first paycheck, I had 52% deducted. So I was shocked. So that's what it is. It is what it is. You are absolutely right. The pay scales in US are considerably different from what you get in Europe. You get the other benefits like work-life balance, or you can get the healthcare system is much better, infrastructure, like Emma mentioned. Even for me, I didn't own a car until the first 4 years, and I decided to move out, and I had to take 2 kids to different lessons. There till then, you use public transport. So yes, that is one thing which was considered for myself when I moved here. But I mean, I like it the way there are many other perks other than the salary, which helps me. Like we have said, went over it several times: culture, work-life balance, everything else. So I chose the latter part of it over just an higher salary part of it. But it's a choice which you have to make.
Sam, it's a great question. Just because I was also debating that, I also have to make this case to the people that I love dearly in the US as to why I'm in Spain. But just for context, at least speaking from my perspective, if I were making my current salary and living in Manhattan, I would have a much different lifestyle. Even with the change in tax bracket, it ends up being comparable to Manhattan, New York, and federal tax. And then also flagging my healthcare is significantly lower. I have minimal transportation costs. I'm flying to Paris for the weekend for 60 euros. It's a very, also my grocery bill is about a quarter of what I paid for when I was with my family in Florida. So they're a bit, yes, from a tax perspective, I think you'll suffer a bit more in Europe, and the salary can be lower. So that's a key consideration if you're thinking, about next steps in career. But if you're looking at net, I think depending on the job that you're looking to take, it may even out closely, or you may even have a bit of a more flexibility from a net income perspective in Europe. I definitely grappled with this a bit, seeing my friends in their work in New York and in DC, but I have I think a bit of a different lifestyle, and even just looking at healthcare, vacation days, the balance in and of itself is very different, I think, compared to the US. So I think depending on the organization you want to be involved in, and if it's worth that trade-off for you, I could not recommend it more.
Great.
Well, that's brought us right up to the hour. Emma, Prasad, thank you so much for coming in and sharing your experiences with us. We've really appreciated it. It's been a great conversation. Thank you all for attending. Hal, do you want to finish off?
Sure. I just wanted to mention briefly, I did drop a link to a very, very short survey in the chat. It's a huge help for us if you could fill that out. It's going to help inform programming for the future and make sure that we can continue to do things like this. Thank you all so much for coming today. And I just want to double up on thanking Emma and Prasad. It's so nice to connect with both of you. And I think all of us are grateful for the opportunity to connect, with you as you're going through these experiences. It's been really insightful. So thank you so much for being here. And I hope that everyone has a great rest of your day, and that Prasad and Emma, you have a good evening. Thanks.
Thank you so much.
Thank
you
you
so
so
much.
much.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye, guys.